Where isn't the money, really? The sweet spot is really in diversified revenue streams. Everyone is very, very focused on ads, but looking at the way some of the largest creators are really growing is by creating more out of their podcast. They're launching books, they're doing tours, they're working with real brands to be putting out products that people enjoy and that really connect with their audience. Like they're becoming a lot more sophisticated about those partnerships.
Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenky, a podcast and media strategist.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk with podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're speaking with Molly DeMellier, Chief Operating Officer of Sundaze PR. We'll be speaking about the ins and outs of podcasting PR, how podcasting is actually a relational media, and the Golden Globes. Let's get down to PodBiz. Molly, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's get right into it. Molly, where's the money in podcasting?
Where isn't the money, really? I think what we're seeing by a lot of creators today, and because of the growth of the creator economy, is the sweet spot is really in diversified revenue streams. Everyone is very, very focused on ads and the growth of programmatic, especially. But looking at the way some of the largest creators and particularly YouTubers are really growing is by creating more out of their podcast. They're launching books, they're doing tours, they're selling not just the gimmicky merch like hats and cups and all of that like we used to see a few years ago, but they're like working with real brands to be putting out products that people enjoy and that really connect with their audience, like whether it be like a health drink or some sort of food partnership or whatever it may be. It really speaks directly to their audience, and they're becoming a lot more sophisticated about those partnerships.
When you're talking about a podcast these days, it's not just your show and your RSS feed, it's really your brand. Right?
Exactly.
It's what are you going to do with it? How are you going to serve the people that are within your audience and community, really, that you build? And then also, what can you provide of value that brings in revenue?
Absolutely. I think community is exactly the right word there. And we've been seeing them grow for a long time. I remember just 2 years ago, we were talking about how powerful the community was in the little Facebook groups about all these shows. And particularly, and I'm such a true crime fan, and how those little Facebook groups, you hear these random stories of how they've actually solved crimes and like gone down these rabbit holes. And now it's really grown into something so much bigger.
And you're with Sundaze PR, which is a podcast PR agency. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the podcasting industry.
Previous to Sundaze PR, I was the director of marketing and PR at Acast. And before that, I was again on the agency side of things. So I worked with companies like iHeart Podcasts and helped work with the Big Money Players Club and Shonda Rhimes and some of these really major podcasters at the time. And also other entertainment companies like Netflix and Getty Images, and really getting exposed to the podcast industry as a whole. And then in my very limited spare time, I actually had my own show at the time with my roommate, who was also a phenomenal stand-up comedian named Erica Spera. And we would talk about dating in New York. And because there are endless stories to tell about that, and particularly the way that women perceive dating and the advice that they're given, why it doesn't really work. So I was surrounded by podcasting and entertainment, and then also doing it in my spare time. And so a role came up at Acast. I spent 4 years there and grew, as I said, to be the director of marketing and PR. And yeah, today I am with Sundaze PR, where we really focus largely on the creator economy. And obviously podcasting is such a big part of that.
And when people think about PR for podcasting, what does that entail?
There's such a misconception about what PR is and the difference between PR and marketing. So what we really do is we look at the companies that are powering the creator economy. So the companies, like one of our clients is Flight Story. So of course they have their whole suite of shows, but they're also growing the creator economy itself. So we're telling those really in-depth business stories. And then there are a few folks that we work with on an individual show basis and looking to get them into like roundups and listicles where that might fit. Also working to get them on as guests on other podcasts. As we all probably know, if you're listening to a podcast, that's really the best way to learn about another show is a recommendation from a host, hearing a host as a guest on a podcast. So working to make those swaps happen where people are listening so that we can hit those core audiences. So yeah, it's a lot of different things.
It is. And it's different from podcast marketing, right? Podcast marketing includes social media, it includes driving audience directly to your show, whereas PR is a more indirect, kind of more top of funnel approach.
I think the easiest way to cut it is, anything marketing is if you're putting money behind it, and PR is earned. So it's getting all of those free opportunities. It tends to have a little bit more audience trust because you can tell, someone's not paying to make this happen. So it's a lot more native to where someone is experiencing any type of media.
What would you say is one key move that's made the biggest impact within your podcasting career?
I think for me, the key move really was going to Acast in so many different ways. At the time, I was a PR manager focused just on the advertiser side of the business. And over the course of 4 years, my role really grew. I had the opportunity to work with just amazing mentors and leaders. And actually, one of them is my current business partner, Sarah Jackson. She was my first boss when I stepped into Acast. So, that introduced me to the person that I'm now running a company with. But I also worked with amazing people like Lizzie Pollett, who had such a great hands on my career, and Tiffany Ashite, and then Oscar Sarander from Wondercraft, who we also work with as a client. And of course, Georgie Holt and Christiana Breton from Flight Story, who I already mentioned that we work with. So I think that career move opened so many doors for me that at the time I could never have anticipated. And then in terms of watching others, I think just the way that we've really seen the creator economy grow and the way that businesses have really taken hold of the influence that these creators have. It's completely reshaped media. We've talked ad nauseum as an industry about the podcast election, but it's so true about how podcasts have really influenced the way that society operates, and even down to shifting our elections. So I think the way that we all have really bought in as a society to these creators and the influence that they have over us has completely shaped my own career as well.
I think sometimes people think when you work for a large organization that really can limit your creativity or your entrepreneurial spirit, but sometimes it's a chapter that can really lead to something else.
I completely agree. There are those businesses that there's so much red tape and you're like, okay, well, I have to stay within these lines and do my job, put my head down. And I was really fortunate that that was never my experience at Acast. I was really empowered by the leaders who I was working under to try new things, to really go out on a limb. And I think Lizzie Pollett, the chief comms and brand officer at Acast, has this amazing ability to give you space to try new things and develop, but also be there to catch you if you fail. And I think that's so important as a manager to be able to do. And she somehow has struck that balance so perfectly that I never felt deserted at all, but I also felt empowered to just run with something and say, hey, I did this thing. It either worked really well or it didn't. And we would, celebrate ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that really speaks to working with a great team, right? And when you're talking about independent creators, it's one person doing everything themselves.
Mhm.
And when you talk about coming from a larger company, a software company, you really have those teams where you're able to, number one, make a bigger impact, but number two, have that support and that mentorship as well.
I think now going into a smaller business, I have this incredible network of people that even though they're not working with me right now, I have a bunch of people that I can text and say, hey, I kind of have, this is what I'm thinking. How would you think about that? I think Brian Barletta is an amazing person who I think of as an ally in that way of just hear me out. Like, does this make sense to you? Does it not? So to have that team of people that I've met over the years and even, pre-Acast, other PR people, just, hey, I have a small team, or do you have the login to this? I need to read this article. Can you send it to me? So I think I found throughout this journey that you find a team, not necessarily like under the same business, but the people who are there to support you no matter what business you're with, and you create new teams.
Yeah, people first. And I think that also speaks to, podcasting itself is still a young industry. And so we never know where any of us are going to end up, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to maintain those relationships and have a network that's valuable, right? And to really value and nurture those connections.
Absolutely. And from a media side, nothing could be more true. My whole role is reaching out to reporters and building those relationships. And I think one thing that can be overlooked is reporters who might be young or just at a smaller outlet. And it's like, you need to think about this relationship and where it could be a few years down the line. And where I saw that most revealing was I built a relationship with Ashley Carmen a long time ago when she was at The Verge, even when Nick Quah was writing Hot Pod. So this is dating me in media. And then as she took it over, I was, of course, working with iHeart at the time, and we continued to build that relationship. And then the day she moved to Bloomberg, I was like, this feels like Christmas morning to me.
Paid off. Yeah, exactly. You hit the jackpot.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, these people go to different places in their careers. So you do need to think about that growth and how you can continue to build those relationships. And then even if people move out of the audio beat, where else could they be a fit? And, how can you tell this story in a different way? And I think podcasting has been challenged to break out of its own echo chambers. So the onus for PR people is to think about, okay, as these contacts go to different places, and there might not be such a big dependence on having someone cover a podcasting specific beat like we saw around kind of COVID era. It was just before COVID era we started to see people write specifically about podcasting, and then it exploded as during COVID everybody made a podcast. And now we're starting to see a bit of a dial back to that. But it's like, think about what these people are writing about now. They didn't all move to retail. Like, they're doing something most likely in a similar space. And how can you tell this story in a bigger way that will probably make a larger impact, not just for your company, but for the industry at large?
When people think about podcast PR, I think we've all been like reading a blog or even just in print media where you see like, okay, wow, this podcast is being featured. And it really does make a difference. And sometimes that means the show, but sometimes that also means the creator, right?
Yeah.
And the creator and the brand and their socials and their overall impact can really also be the value as well as the show.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. We get so many people who are very, very dialed in on, I need this show to be in this like top 10 roundup or whatever it might be, and so focused on the show itself rather than, you look at Hannah Berner and Paige DeSorbo of Giggly Squad. They are everywhere. That PR team is absolutely crushing it, and doing profiles on them as individuals because it makes them more human as well. You have Hannah, who is just hilarious comedian. She goes down that rabbit hole and it speaks to that audience. And then you have Paige being positioned as this fashion girly as she is, and speaking to style and those types of audiences. And I went to their live show because they're an Acast podcast, and they had 2 nights sold out at Radio City. And you saw the Hannahs and the Paiges in the group, people dressing up in the ties like Hannah wears. And they're like, oh, I'm such a Hannah. And then the people with their nails done in a particular color that, Paige was really into at the time. And if you think about it and really humanize them in that way and know how to speak to those audiences, you're going to get results like that. And it was fascinating to see.
Thanks for joining us here on PodBiz. If you're liking the show, please subscribe and write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other podcast pros find the show. Thanks so much. And back to PodBiz. I want to ask you next, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
A lot. Gosh, that's where to begin. I think that's a whole other podcast. No, I think really the time and relationships that it takes. There's some people who I've been knocking on their door for the better part of 10 years and still haven't cracked that exclusive. But, we're having deep conversations about the industry, clients that I'm working with, sending them data. It's like PR is very much a slow burn, and it can take a very long time to pay off. But when it does, it's going to be big. I think when people want PR, they want the fast exclusive. They want something, everyone wants to be in the New York Times. And it's like, well, of course, but how do we get there? Like, there is a build here. And it's not, we put a press release out on the wire and, within an hour, someone picks it up. It's, if you want a good story, you really need to be pitching it for about 2 weeks and hope that you break through. Because God, I get so many emails in my inbox. I'm sure everyone listening to this does too. Imagine being a reporter where your job is for people to reach out to you and send you pitches. And so many of them are becoming AI automated now too, that it's like they have so much they need to weed through. So that's where relationships become incredibly important in landing that story, and time to do it. If I'm going to get a story, assume I need to follow up 3 times for a reporter to answer me. I cannot do that in one day. That takes a long time.
Otherwise, that would be stalking. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, and they have laws against that.
Exactly. Do you find that AI has really kind of just crowded the space with noise in terms of being able to push a story forward or in terms of the outreach to media outlets?
I think so. Yeah, I have heard things of like, people can just tell when a pitch is AI generated. So I think it allows people to sometimes not be as thoughtful. I guess I'll correct that. The people who are not using it properly to not be as thoughtful, to just chuck some ideas into Chat GPT or whatever it is that they're using and then create like a canned response in email and send it out and not be very personal. The way that I use Chat GPT or AI tools is to put some idea, to write a pitch and then ask it to refine it or shift it to this type of reporter or, put in some data examples from whatever it might be and really just use it to beef up what I'm doing and then always continuing to be personable with the reporters. If I'm have a close relationship with someone, I need to say like, hey, it was great seeing you the other day, or, how was that ski trip or whatever it was, let them know that I remember them. You're selling them that story. So I think if you're doing it right, it shouldn't really be bogging down. It should be enhancing whatever it is that you do. And I think that's probably true for any sort of AI work that you're doing.
Yeah. And it also sounds like it's true. And, I feel this as well. It's really a relationship forward industry in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. Well, if you had to start over, is there anything that you would do differently to grow maybe your business or your career faster or smarter?
The business is still very young. We launch officially May 20th. So I'm sure if you ask me this in three months even, but definitely 6, there would be things that I would say I would do differently. As far as my career, I was very fortunate that I got to work with really large companies, particularly Netflix and iHeart very early on. My agency Launch Squad took a really big bet on me and for some reason thought I could work with like the Connell Burns and the Ted Sarandoses of the world when I only had about a year of experience under my belt. And, being able to note those companies in my pitches to reporters, everyone wanted to open my emails really early on because I was the girl who might have some news about Netflix. Or even if it wasn't about Netflix and it was about a small company, they wanted to respond because pretty soon I would have it and they would want that scoop. So I think being able to have the exposure to those companies was a complete game changer for me. And that's something I certainly would not change. And, I still sometimes even say, hey, it's been ages since we've talked, but remember that Netflix story that we worked on? And they're like, oh yeah. Or she might still have it.
It kind of also ties back to like you never know where your career is going to take you, right? You never know who you're going to intersect with later that you had like an intersection with maybe years earlier.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I probably could have done more of was back then as I was learning how to do PR and I was all of a sudden working with these major companies and I was screwing up multiple times every day. And just learning very early on PR things. So I started working freelance with a bunch of comedians that I knew because I was like, well, they're not going to know if I mess up and I'll learn through them. And, I come from a sports background. So in my head, I was like, to get better at something, you need more reps. That's how you get better in the gym. It's how you do everything better. So I think I probably would have done more of that. I think sometimes I was a little afraid to branch out too far. And that's ultimately actually what led me on this path to partnering with Sarah on Sundays. And I think maybe if I had done more of it, it would have given me the confidence to get here faster, or just continued to beef up my client relation skills as I was in-house at Acast, because that's something I'm coming back to now and I haven't done in a long time, and just a different muscle to strengthen again. But doing a little bit more of that, I think would have probably been beneficial.
It sounds like the more relationships, the better. And so you could always be hard on yourself about what relationships you didn't foster or you didn't, pour into every single cup. But at the same time, it's cumulative. And like you said, the more reps, the better. Well, Molly DeMellier, it's been such a pleasure. We have one last question. What are you most excited about in podcasting right now?
I think seeing it break into mainstream media, seeing that podcasts are going to be added to the Golden Globes in 2026. I remember when those award recognitions started to come for streaming. And it was a complete game changer for the industry. And it's what really saw streaming get recognized as a real form of entertainment. And I see podcasting starting to take that trajectory now as well. And that's so exciting watching these creators and not just like the celebrities who already have millions and billions of dollars, but seeing at-home creators still be able to thrive and create businesses out of this, I think is just absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.